Okie dokie. Let me ask you, have you ever wanted to eat a suit of armor? I mean, just look at it. Oh, god damn, that looks good. I want to taste it so bad. And thanks to the power of God and anime, I can finally fulfill my lifelong dream of just eating a hunk of metal. Here we go! But how does this affect the ecosystem? Dungeon Meshi is about a dungeon that is very meshy. What does meshy mean? Well, it means food. Or rice? Noodles? You get the idea. And Dungeon Meshi is an anime with a variety of food. Could I interest you in a man-eating plant tart? Ghost sorbet? Jack-o'-lantern potage? Just don't stare into his eyes for too long. Those big, beautiful eyes. Or maybe you want something a bit more exotic. That suit of armor at the start wasn't just a bit. Our funny little gang, Laios, Marcel, Chucklefuck, and Senshi actually do eat a suit of armor. But how do they do that? Isn't metal like kinda hard to chew, let alone digest? Well, Dungeon Meshi actually solves this in one simple way. That's right, monster ecosystem! I mean, the monsters are pretty cool. Let's teleport to episode 3. Our gang here is trying to save Fallon, Laios' sister, who is currently being digested inside a giant red dragon. They need to get to her quickly to revive her before she's nothing but skin and bones. However, they first need to get through this hall of living armor. They assume a mage is hiding behind the door at the end, so Laios sneaks past them to face whoever is controlling them. But questions keep popping up in his head. Where is this supposed mage? Why do these suits of armor turn towards you when they have no eyes or ears? Why is this big guy not using his shield to protect himself? Hang on a minute. Turns out there is no magic spell controlling these suits of armor. The secret to how they move is actually a living, breathing creature. A mollusk, in fact. What is a mollusk? Well, they're basically these soft, squishy creatures that don't have bones, more often a shell that protects them. Think of snails or clams. This mollusk, however, doesn't grow your usual shell. The shells they grow look more like gloves, chest plates, helmets. They basically combine together to form a full suit, linking with each other to act as muscles, giving the illusion of an empty suit of armor moving on its own. It's kind of like those ant colonies that use their own bodies as bridges to cross gaps, linking up together to go even further beyond. Laios even questions whether it's bugs that are controlling the inside initially. This colony of mollusks working together to defend their habitat and eggs, it's like something you can find on the Discovery Channel but for a fantasy world. More importantly, this means we can actually eat a suit of armor. Maybe not the shell, but the yummy meat tucked inside. There's a surprising amount of thought put into this one creature that only appears for one episode. Even the small details like maybe when they're holding hands, it's actually the mollusks mating, or the fact that they're not poisonous because they use shells. Poisonous creatures have no need for armor when they already have a natural defense. For what is originally a C-tier fantasy monster, like, they're cool and all, but they're no dragons or arachne.
Spider Mommy!
Dungeon Meshi manages to redesign this mob enemy into one of the most interesting and memorable monsters in the entire series. And it doesn't stop there. I said this was an ecosystem, but we've only talked about one monster species interacting with itself. What about with others? Treasure bugs are bugs that look like treasure. Did you really need me to explain that one for you? They appear in episode 5 after this poor party got tricked into thinking they struck literal gold, only to be killed by the camo critters. Marcel stuns them, who turn them into snacks and jam, and that's kind of it for them. Pretty cool monsters, basically the penny stuck in the ground prank, but instead of making you look silly, you fucking die. But I guess that's the last we'll ever see of them, right? Wrong! Episode 6 introduces us to the classic Mimic, which is now this sort of hermit crab monster that hides in objects like chests to lure in unsuspecting adventurers looking for valuables. But where there's treasure chests, there has to be treasure, and it turns out that treasure bugs have a very interesting relationship with mimics. When a treasure bug discovers a suspicious chest, they crawl inside to where the mimic would be and use it to lay their eggs. Once the eggs hatch, they have this ready-made meal in the form of the poor mimic, eating it alive until there's nothing left but their brethren of treasure bugs. A chest full of treasure, from one monster trap to another, which means that it's very likely that the small box the previous party found was most likely a mimic that had fallen prey to the treasure bugs. They're kinda like parasitoid wasps, you know, the ones that lay their eggs on other insects, feeding off the poor victim and eventually killing them, hence the name parasite. Treasure bugs are basically a parasite for mimics. So it's not just really cool monsters independent of each other, but actual food chains being formed that link them together. Another example, changeling rings are mushrooms that appear at the end of season 1. The spores they produce have the magical ability to transform the race of anyone that steps inside. A tall man becomes a dwarf, an elf becomes a half-foot, so on and so on. It's a fun idea that changes up the dynamic of the party, but as a creature, it's a pretty random ability to have, right? How does this benefit the changeling in any way? Well, when an adventurer steps into one, they might get mildly inconvenienced for a bit until it wears off. But if an animal steps into one, they basically become something unrecognizable to their pack, resulting in them being ditched by their peers and dying alone, becoming the perfect fertilizer full of spores to grow into a new changeling ring. While not exactly the same, it's kinda like what happens when a wild animal gets sprayed by a skunk. When a human gets sprayed, all that really happens to you is you now have a really bad day. But when an animal gets sprayed, it can be pretty debilitating, since animals rely heavily on smell. If a prey animal gets skunked, they suddenly become much easier to hunt because they have a much stronger scent. Predators, vice versa, become much easier to detect because you can smell them from a mile away. If they're unable to wash it off, it could very likely result in their demise, either by the hands of another animal, or just starving to death because no one will come near them, friends or food. Granted, I got this tidbit from Reddit, all the other sources were about what happens when your dog gets sprayed, so hopefully there's some skunk experts in the comments that can correct me if I'm wrong. And then there's dungeon cleaners. Episode 16 reveals that the dungeon can actually fix itself through tiny little critters. Whenever an adventurer kills a monster or damages a structure, dungeon cleaners will come in to clean up the mess, eating up any corpses or debris left behind, and then secreting a substance that can transform into various materials, filling in the gaps and making it look like nothing ever happened. They're kind of like a cross between biodegraders or scavengers that decompose organic matter like corpses, and the immune system we find in our own bodies, healing up any cuts or scratches. So if we zoom in on what a dungeon cleaner actually looks like, we'll see this.
血小板が。
血小板って言うんですか？
ああ、
こんにちは。お疲れ様です。こんにちは。
お疲れさん。
すいません。何かあったの？ごめんなさい。あのね。
So dungeon ecosystems are basically able to stabilize themselves even when adventurers cause little damage, almost like there's some higher power controlling the way the dungeon functions, maybe a mad mage from a long lost kingdom? Nah, probably not. But it does go to show that the ecosystem of Dungeon Meshi exists not only between the different monsters, but also with the adventurers as well. Adventurers killing monsters is what stops the dungeon from overpopulating, which prevents villagers from being attacked by the overflow. When dungeons do become too crowded to handle, the town mayor would usually just hire more adventurers to stabilize the infestations. Either that or a third party comes to intervene, like the Mysterious Canaries, a group of elves who wish to take control of dungeons for motives not yet made clear. It really goes to show how important a dungeon is to the economy of this fantasy world. Entire towns being built around the riches and resources that lurk within the depths. It's akin to the Gold Rush era of Australia, when millions of migrants came from across the world for the opportunity to pan for gold, resulting in some real cross-cultural pollination that really boosted Australia's economy for the time. At least until the gold ran out. And then we have the actual writing of Dungeon Meshi weaved into the concepts of their monsters. When Marcel gets hit by a faraway mandrake scream, it doesn't end up killing her, but puts her in a daze that allows her to finally be honest about her insecurities. The living paintings being used to tell the backstory of the Delgel Kingdom, which is now the ruins this entire dungeon is built on, showcasing the birth, wedding, assassination, and coronation of the last kings, telling a story that is splintered into fragments, yet still so easy to understand and digest, along with foreshadowing the power of Thistle being able to recognize the intruder that is sneaking into the past, which even gets referenced much later when we actually meet him as the Mad Mage.
汚らわしい盗賊が貴様見覚えがあるぞ。絵画の中をうろついていたな。
And then there's the Nightmare. Episode 19 introduces us to monsters that prey upon those that slumber, taking control of their dreams so that they can feed on their emotions and distress. It's a classic storytelling trope using literal nightmares to explore the traumas and fears of certain characters. We get to see a little bit of this in Laios' mind, his poor relationship with his parents, his struggles with understanding his peers caused by what is probably autism. But we're here to save Marcel, the one who was originally possessed by the nightmare, which is where we really get to see the writing shine. At this point in the story, the party has managed to find Fallon. However, they had arrived far too late. Since revival magic needs the body to bring people back to life, Marcel reveals that she's been researching black magic, and she just so happens to have a spell that can recreate a body through the flesh of others. That flesh being the red dragon they killed to save Fallon. Just a little bit of voodoo never hurt anyone. What could possibly go wrong? Marcel's nightmare has her transformed into a little kid, one that is constantly running away from a fearsome monster. Pretty cliche dream, am I right? But the more we explore, the more we come to understand Marcel. Her conflicting emotions over the fact that she's a long-lived elf, one that will far outlive the close companions she holds dear. The guilt she has over what happened to Fallon, the black magic resulting in her being captured by the Mad Mage and transformed into a brainwashed chimera. All of this leading to the reveal of the actual monster that's been chasing us all this time. This out of control mutation that rapidly ages whoever it touches. The fact that this imaginary monster, created by another monster, is able to seamlessly combine the layers of Marcel's trauma, her fear of the death of others, the sin of dabbling in the taboo hurting the very person she was trying to save. It really goes to show how much care and detail has been put into both the world and the characters of Dungeon Meshi. A story that is delicious not only in food, but in the ecosystem that connects us all to the dungeon.
Dungeon Meshi. Ah, Dungeon Meshi.
Now, for what we've all been waiting for, I don't actually want to eat a suit of armor. I want dragons. Senshi's even prepared the meat for us. Senshi? Well, I guess we still have Fallon.